In the past few years alone, I have conducted over 3,000 sales calls with 3,000 different individuals. And these are typically 1 hour calls with a lot of depth to the conversation. And what I mean by that is, as part of the sales process, we're going very deep into that person's pain, their fears, their deepest, darkest desires. And off this gigantic data set about people's lives, you start to identify patterns. You start to really be able to identify where people go wrong, where people go right, and ultimately you pick up a lot of lessons about life, which is what this video is for. We're going to be walking you through the lessons that I've learned through 3,000 sales calls so that you can learn these, apply these lessons in order to better your life, to avoid common mistakes without needing to go through 3,000 sales calls. So, just before we dive in, if you are new to the channel, welcome to the cult. If you are a returning viewer, I really appreciate you tuning in and supporting me. This video is going to be slightly different to what you're used to because I normally go into a document, I teach you something about making a 10 to 30,000 a month remote income by selling in the AI industry. But today's video is going to be different. There's going to be no document, it's just going to be me, a camera, a microphone, and diving into the lessons about life that I've learned throughout my career and throughout 3,000 sales calls. So, incredibly excited for this one. Really lock in, really absorb the lessons I've learned about life, and I promise you, your life will improve in so many more ways from it. So, lesson number one, such an important lesson to digest and apply. And it goes like this. More people's lives are ruined by the things that they didn't do versus the things they did do. Now, I want you right now to think about your social circle. Think about all the people that you've ever met and known throughout your life. And let me ask you, how many people do you know whose lives were just genuinely ruined by some kind of decision that they made? Now, don't get me wrong, it can absolutely happen. You know, as an example, somebody can go out drinking one night, they make a decision to get in the car and drive home, they hit somebody while they're drunk driving, and then they spend years in jail, okay? That's an example, albeit a dark example, of a decision that somebody made that ruined their life, okay? So don't get me wrong, it's absolutely possible that somebody can make a decision that ruins their lives, but it's pretty rare, okay? I know this throughout my own personal experience in life and also through speaking with 3,000 different individuals in sales calls. It's pretty rare that somebody makes a decision that ruins their life. But you know what's a lot more common though? In fact, astronomically more common is people who ruin their lives by the decisions they didn't make. The things that they never did do, the business they never started, the job opportunity they never took, the content they never posted, the girl they never talked to. I can tell you guys for a fact, as a man in his 30s, uncle status, that all of the people that I've grown up with, I cannot tell you how many people I know who had great potential, but their lives just never really amounted to much. And it's all because of the things that they didn't do, not the things they did do. So guys, inaction really can ruin a person's life, okay? Inaction is the silent killer of dreams. So some practical advice on this lesson before we move on is that, as the Nike slogan goes, just do it. Okay, stop overanalyzing, stop overthinking, make it a habit to put action into thought immediately. Because action taking is a habit and a muscle which can be grown through conscious, repetitive willpower. And what will happen is, after a while of practicing this consciously, it will eventually become unconscious. You won't have to think about putting action into thought. It will just become a habit. It will become an unconscious part of your identity. It will just be who you are. But importantly and dangerously, the inverse is also true. So I really cannot stress this enough. Do not train your mind to be okay with inaction. Think about this. Will missing one gym session cause you to immediately lose strength and immediately lose muscle? No. Will delaying a task by 24 hours cause you to go broke the next day? No. But the thing is, the dangerous thing is, every time that you do not do the action that you are meant to do, what happens is the habit of inaction gains a tighter grip on you. And trust me, this mental habit, I know this for a fact, throughout all my years of sales, 3,000 sales calls, and my own personal life, this mental habit of inaction can destroy your dreams. You've got a far more likely chance that your dreams can be ruined by inaction versus action. So just really train your mind, guys. Thought impulse, act on it. Which leads me nicely to the second lesson, which is the people that you look up to. I'm talking more specifically the people that you look up to online, the people that you see, you know, with millions of followers, making millions of dollars, living a great lifestyle. Those kind of people, I promise you, are not that much smarter than you, if at all. Now, they did do something different to you, which I'll go into in just a second. But the thing is that throughout my life, throughout my career, I've been very fortunate to meet and build relationships with many of these high-level people that you probably see online, you know, the gurus, if you want to call it that. Okay, many guys that are doing, 7 figures a year, 8 figures a year. And one thing I can tell you for sure from knowing these people personally is that many of them are way less smart than what you think. Because the thing is like, don't get me wrong, as a disclaimer, I'm not saying that these people are dumb by any means. I've met these kind of people that we're talking about, I've met a lot of them, and many of them are very sharp, they're very smart, they're very hardworking, charismatic. I'm not saying they're dumb, I'm just saying that I think as human beings, we have this tendency to, we see somebody online doing very well, and we almost like put them on a pedestal. And we think that they're almost like a different species to us. Whereas I think if you guys met a lot of these people that you watch online and that you really admire, you would very, very quickly realize that they are just like you. They are not that much smarter than you, if at all. If you're the kind of person that can sit through a video like this with no editing, with no fancy, editing that's firing off your dopamine receptors, if you can sit through a video like this, I promise you, you are almost certainly above average IQ. Okay, and that's all you need. Now, I'm going to tell you a story that perfectly illustrates this. So, a while ago, I was at a mastermind event in Dubai. Okay, now sat next to me was a very, very famous fitness influencer. I'm not going to tell his name for obvious reasons in a second, but I'm talking like making millions of dollars a year, has millions of followers. Anybody who is remotely into the gym and into fitness, you will know who this guy is. Okay, anyways. So we're at this event, okay, and the speaker at the time is talking about another influencer who's recently launched a low-ticket community product, okay, where he charges $98 a month and he has around 1,000 people in there, okay. Now, as the speaker's saying that, I just happen to glance over my shoulder and I see this fitness influencer who's next to me typing into his calculator 98 times by 1,000. Like, think about that. Think about that. A guy who is 100 times richer and more famous than you cannot do the most basic of math sums in his head. 98 times 1,000, I'm sure you could do that, boom, within a millisecond, okay? But he can't. So you really are very likely just as smart, if not smarter, than a lot of these people online that you look up to. But again, like I said earlier, they did do something different to you, which is, it goes back to lesson 1. They did the thing. They posted the videos, they wrote that email, they ran that advert. It goes back to lesson 1 again. Inaction is the killer of dreams. So these guys that you look up to, the key difference, it's not about intelligence. The key thing is that they took action when many people didn't. They overcame their fear of judgment when many people didn't. They conquered their laziness when many people didn't. And now they're living a life that many people won't be able to. So I really want you guys to know that if you're watching this, I guarantee you 90% plus of you watching, like you watching this right now, if you don't end up achieving your desired life, I promise you it's almost certainly not because of a lack of intelligence. But what's more likely is it will be because of a lack of character traits. For example, courage. Courage to get yourself out there. Having positive beliefs about yourself. Taking action. Because the thing is, guys, as well, this is kind of a side lesson here, but achieving goals, in my opinion, it's really not that complicated. So let me walk you through this. So to achieve a certain goal, if you really, really think about it, pick any goal in life. And there are probably just 2 to 5 things maximum that you need to do every single day over a period of time. So for example, let's say, a fitness example, your goal is to get 6-pack abs. Well, what are the things that you need to do daily? You need to go to the gym. You need to eat a certain number of grams of protein per day. You need to eat a certain number of calories per day. And that's it. And then it's just about doing that over an extended period of time. If your goal is to get, 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, what do you need to do? You need to script out X amount of videos per week, and you need to record X amount of videos per week, and you need to post X amount of videos per week. And then just keep doing that, compound it over a time frame. If you want to make 20,000 a month by selling in the AI industry, which is what I do and what my clients do and what we teach and what the whole business is about, what do you need to do? You need to show up to your calls daily, and you need to do X amount of training daily. That's it. And then just let time elapse. So some practical advice on this one. This might seem like a bit of a side tangent, but it actually does apply to this second lesson. Some practical advice, okay, is that step 1 in life is to define your goal. I'm a big believer in the power of clarity. You have to know exactly what it is that you want and exactly where you are going. So let's just say for this example, your goal is to make 20,000 a month by selling in the AI industry. Okay, define the goal. So you've defined your goal, 20,000 a month. Step number 2 is to logically think about and write out the 2 to 5 daily tasks that need to be done every single day in order to achieve that goal. This is really not hard to comprehend. It's very rarely more than 5 things that you need to do daily to hit your goal. And then it's just about doing them consistently every single day, which leads me to step 3. You've defined your goal. You've identified the 2 to 5 daily tasks that you need to do. Step number 3 is to create a daily habits tracker that will track whether or not you completed the daily tasks. Okay, I'll link down below in the description. I've got a habits tracker template that you can just copy. And essentially what you do is at the end of every single day, just take 2 minutes. It'll take 2 minutes. Just fill out your tracker and you mark down whether or not you completed each of the daily tasks or not. Now, what this does is not only does it keep you accountable, but it will become very easy to forecast whether or not you will hit your goal. So, for example, if your goal is 6-pack abs and you look back at your tracker and see that you are doing the 2 to 5 things daily consistently, then you will know for certain that your goal will be achieved with enough of a time horizon. But of course, the inverse is also true. If you look back through your tracker, you see that I'm not hitting the gym, I'm not eating the right amount of calories, etc. Well, then you can know that your goal is simply not going to be hit. And this is important because human beings, we like predictability. We like certainty. It makes us feel at ease. And when you do this process, when you have the habit tracker, you have the predictability of knowing ahead of time whether you will or will not achieve your goal based on looking at your tracker and seeing if you've actually been doing the task daily, which ultimately will just make your state of mind so much calmer. Which leads me on to lesson number 3. Aura is a very real thing. Now, to explain this, there's a guy called Dana White, owner of the UFC. Many of you will know him. For those that don't, UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship, he's the guy that owns the company, okay? So Dana White often talks about fighters having that thing. Now, pay attention to that wording, that thing. But he always refers to it as that thing. You have to bear in mind, the UFC as an organization, they make money from having superstars, from having fighters that are very famous, that get people to pay for tickets, that get people to pay for pay-per-view, etc. They really drive revenue from having stars. So Dana White is always on the lookout for stars, for people that he thinks have the potential to really drive revenue. And when he's talking about scouting for those kind of people, again, he talks about some fighters just having that thing that makes them a star, that thing that makes other people want to pay attention to them and listen to what they have to say, the thing that makes people want to pay to watch them. Now, again, remember that wording. Dana White calls it that thing, which is very interesting. And I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that the reason Dana White describes it as that thing is because that thing is very difficult to describe in words. It's a bit more esoteric than that. It just can't quite be described in words. There's no words in the English language that can describe it. It's more of a feeling. The closest words that we have to describe it, in my opinion, is somebody's aura. Okay. Now, a quick story here that illustrates this. Back when I was selling on behalf of Charlie Morgan's team. Charlie's a fairly famous guy on the internet. I had a call with a young guy named Josh. Now, Josh at the time was a young 19-year-old kid. He had never ran a business before, never made $1 from an online business, didn't have much knowledge about how the world of internet business works. And at this point, I'd probably conducted about 2,000-ish, 1,500, 2,000 sales calls by this point. But I cannot explain, the gut feeling that I had just from within minutes of getting on the call with Josh, I knew that he was going to do well. I knew this kid was going to be successful. Again, the reason why is a bit difficult to explain in words. He just had that thing. He had this, this probably sounds wrong, but he had this kind of charming charisma to him. A charisma which was like playful, it was positive, it was high energy, yet he was also very intent on like listening and taking things seriously. He could intertwine between, being playful and funny, but then being serious. And then we got to the end of the call and he used practically his entire net worth, all of his savings that he'd been saving for, however long, to pay for the whole thing in full on the spot. Now, 3 months later, that guy, this 19-year-old kid with no business experience, was doing about $15,000 per month in his business. I think last I checked, probably around 9 months later, he was doing about $50,000 a month from a complete fresh beginner with no prior business experience or even knowledge. I'd estimate his IQ was probably around average, probably slightly above average, but his aura was there. And I really, really began to, humbly speaking, I really began to develop this sense. Again, you just get so much data from all of these sales calls, 3,000 sales calls, a lot of depth to the conversation. I really can very accurately predict whether somebody will do very, very well or somebody will do average or whether somebody will do below average. And I would say my success rate on prediction of that is probably about 85, 90%. Of course, it's not 100%. I might get it wrong occasionally. Somebody might surprise me. Somebody who I thought would do average does very well. Somebody who I thought would do excellent doesn't do as well. But you go through this data and just really you just begin to develop this gut feeling about somebody, about whether they will do well. And again, unfortunately, that gut feeling is hard to describe in words. The closest word, in my opinion, that we have is aura, somebody's aura, okay? And what I really want to illustrate is that aura alone can carry you very, very far. I would argue 80% of the way. I would argue that your aura is more important than your IQ. A man with a good aura can outcompete a man who's much more intelligent and even hardworking than him, but who lacks aura, in my opinion. I've seen this time and time again. I've spent a lot of time thinking about how you can increase your aura, so here it is, some practical advice. Now, guys, I don't want to go off on some schizo deep dive about the nature of reality and the link between your inner world of your mind and the external world of your results, but let's just say I've had multiple experiences in life which confirm the old saying that as you think, you become. I've had crazy experiences, which I won't go into right now. Hyper-specific things that I thought about in my mind that eventually ended up happening. And again, hyper-specific things. I'm not talking about like I thought about a cup of coffee and then I had one. Like hyper-specific things. Anyways, my clients that I work with, we go a little bit, we go deeper into this stuff, and there really, really is a link between what happens up here and what happens out there. Much more of a link than human beings and even myself even realize. But anyways, that tees up what I'm about to go into next. That in order to increase your aura, you can follow these steps. Step number 1, you want to create a mental picture in your mind, a mental scene in your imagination, where people are complimenting you about your aura. Step number 2, this is very, very key, is that you want to feel deeply the positive emotions and feelings of how good you feel. So really just in that scene in your imagination, have people, in your imagination, people that you respect and people that you would like to compliment you, have them there and have them complimenting you about your aura, and then really feel those positive emotions deeply. Feel how your energy is just charged up, like you're feeling incredible. Feel how insanely charismatic you feel. And then step number 3 is to recreate this mental scene in your imagination every single night before you go to sleep. The really, really key thing here is you want to be creating this mental scene in your imagination right as you're on the cusp of being awake and being asleep. When you go to sleep every night, there's just that little point right before you drift off where you're still awake, but you're just going into sleep. That is where you want to create this mental scene in your imagination, okay? And the key as well, don't create a new scene every night. Make it the same thing every single night. The same mental picture, the same people, the same background scenery, etc. And what will happen is, over time with practice, you will be able to feel more and more into this imaginary scene until at some point it can frankly get a bit scary. Like it feels so real, it feels so vivid. Again, it's scary how you can't discern it at some point from actual reality, which again can get a little bit scary. But anyways, so the point is, guys, this mental exercise of mental rehearsal, imagination, it really can work. And I absolutely know this from experience, it really can increase your aura, which is just one of the most important factors to your success in your life. Now, guys, I've got so many more lessons that I could go through, but I'm just going to put this out there to the internet, to YouTube, and see what the reaction is, because again, this is different to my normal kind of videos where I go into a document, I teach you something about sales, about selling in the AI industry, but this is different, so I'm just going to gauge the reaction, and if there's a positive reaction, then I will be making another part 2 video where we will go into a lot more lessons about life. So thank you very much for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you are not subscribed to the channel, do consider it, my friend, and I will see you in the next video.